Okay, this video is on the difference between the first three formulas that you're going to see on your formula sheet, and they deal with sequences, arithmetic sequences. The first one is a recursive formula, and basically you're supposed to state what the first term is, and then state how to get to any other term based on the previous. So A1 is term number 1. AN is to get to any term you want. That says Amy, but pretend it says any. And then AN minus 1 stands for the previous term. That's what AN minus 1 stands for. Okay? So let's pretend that they gave you a sequence that went 3, 8, 13. What would be next? 18 next. 23, it would continue. And let's pretend that it stops at 108. Do you think it's going to stop at 108 at some point? Seems to be hitting all the 3s and 8s, right? 23, 28, 33, 38. So it'll hit 108, right? Okay. So the recursive formula, you simply state, what's the first term? 3. What's it growing by? 5. That would conclude the recursive formula. All right? You separately state the first from the change. What's the first term? How does it change? Check. That's the recursive. The explicit formula combines these into one. And in one nice, tidy formula, you state, what's the first term? 3. What's it growing by? How many times? N minus 1. That's this formula. It tells you what the pattern is in one line. All right? So if you wanted to get to the 9th term, you'd plug in 9. If you wanted to get to the 19th term, you'd plug in 19. Okay? Some people prefer this formula to be simplified. What's 5 times n? What's 5 times negative 1? What's 3 minus 5? This is the explicit formula, but instead of using A1, it uses A0, which would be the term before the first term. If you backtracked, what number would be right here in the pattern? Negative 2. That's what A0 would be. So this is the explicit formula using n minus 1 and A1. This is the explicit formula using n and A0. They would produce the same sequence. Check. Now, for the sum, I'm going to get rid of recursive just to practice the last formula. Let's pretend they were asking for what all of these numbers add up to. Is it arithmetic? Yes. So we can use the arithmetic sum formula. The sum is, how many terms are there? We'll come back to that, over 2, times the first plus the last. In case you're joining us late, this problem isn't in your packet anywhere. We're just explaining the difference between the 3 formulas on the formula sheet using that blue example. Okay, how many terms are there? There's 2 ways you can do this. Some students prefer to just think about it and figure it out. What would the jump be if you started at 3 on the number line and jumped all the way to 108? How far did you jump? 105. But how big is each of these jumps? 5, right? So you can figure out how many jumps there are by dividing by 5. How big are those mini jumps? What's 105 divided by 5? 21. So do you agree that if you were stepping on these numbers and you started here and you jumped 21 times, counting by 5, you would eventually land on 108, right? But the n isn't how many jumps there are, it's how many numbers there were that you stepped on. So if you do this method, you always have to add 1. There's 22 numbers in that pattern. Okay? So n is 22. 3 and 108 add up to 111. The answer would be whatever 11 times 111 is, which is, of course, 1,221. I just knew that. Now, let's say you're not good at figuring out the jumps in your head logically, and you would rather use a formula. Okay, what's the last term? Put that in for an. Got it? Add 2 to both sides. Divide by 5. What's 110 divided by 5? 22. That's how many terms there were. Okay? So the difference in the formulas. Recursive is a way to come up with a formula that makes that sequence. Explicit is a way to get to any term using this red formula. The sum formula is what all the numbers add up to. Got it?